Happy Father's Day to all dads everywhere. Today I'm feeling grateful for my dad. I'm fortunate that he's still around. And it was a blessing to grow up with such a good dad. Now, my dad was one of my high school teachers. For some kids, that would be less than ideal. Not for me. He was my high school band director, and I loved band. He also taught theory and jazz history and led the jazz band, and I was in all of those things, which meant that every day of my high school career, 4 years, I had my father for at least 2 periods a day, and I'm grateful for that. Even if things between us were rocky at home, we got along just fine in the school music room. As I think about my dad's influence on me, I'm so grateful for something you might not expect. My dad has always been funny. He never took himself too seriously, and he made people laugh. And I like to think I share those traits. One of my early boyhood memories comes from a time early in the 1960s. Now, this was the time of the Cold War. Fidel Castro was the leader of communist Cuba, and we knew him as the guy who always wore the army fatigues and hat. He had a big beard. He always had a cigar. Nikita Khrushchev was the leader of Soviet Russia, and we knew him as the little, bald, fat guy who once pounded his shoe on a desk during a speech at the United Nations. Well, my mom and my dad decided to crash a formal dinner party some friends were attending. Dad put on his army fatigues and had a fake beard and a cigar. He was Fidel Castro. My mom wore one of Dad's suits with a big pillow under the jacket to make her look fat, and she wore a bald cap. She was Nikita Khrushchev. Seeing my parents dress up like this as a prank on some friends made a powerful impression on me as a little boy. Maybe you now realize where I get some of my eccentricities. Now, my dad and my mom also liked to host parties at our house. For one of these parties, everyone was supposed to come dressed as a song. Remember, my dad was a music teacher. So one guy came wearing a barrel and carrying a fireplace poker, and he was the beer barrel polka. Another guy came with a vendor's tray of candy around his neck, and he was that Sammy Davis Jr. song, Candyman. One lady came with all the buttons of her clothes done kind of the wrong way. Her belly button was showing, and her hair was all messed up. And there was a song back then called She's Come Undone. Another guy wore a giant cardboard whiskey bottle, and he was Beethoven's Fifth. Now, my dad is a jazz pianist, and he knows about every song there is, and he had the best costume. He just wore his regular clothes, but he had a big hand-lettered sign around his neck on a ribbon, and it said, "Just Married." Everyone thought he was the Mendelssohn Wedding March, "Here Comes the Bride," but they were wrong. Well, by the end of the evening, all of the other costumes and songs had been identified, but not Dad's. Everyone wanted to know what song he was. And he smiled and he said, "Well, there's an old Duke Ellington tune. It's called 'Tonight I Shall Sleep with a Smile on My Face.'" My dad got first prize for his costume. And then back in the late 1980s, when I was an adult, I was serving as an assistant rector in a large church just outside Chicago. We had a church Halloween party. Paula, my wife Paula, and I went in costume. I wore this very robe. It's getting pretty old now, but I wore this robe with the hood up, and I had a skull mask over my face. And I was carrying a toy plastic scythe like a farmer would use. Paula wore one of my suits with a pillow in the jacket to make her look fat, and she had a mustache painted on. She wore a derby hat and carried a briefcase with 3 big letters, IRS. We were together, We were death and taxes, and we won first prize. And after the party, Paula went to pick up our 8-year-old son from Cub Scouts. She stayed in costume, and let me tell you, it freaked out our son a little bit, like when I saw my mom dressed as Nikita Khrushchev. Costumes are fun, and costumes bring a little mental change to the people wearing them and in the people who see the costumes. For example, the first time you put on a special robe and do something in church as a reader or an acolyte or a chalice bearer or a deacon or a priest, you feel different, and people look at you differently. I know that when I wear my clergy collar out in public, people look at me differently than they do when I wear jeans and a t-shirt. And I feel different too. The costumes we wear make a difference. The Apostle Paul wrote that when we get baptized, we get clothed with Christ, or we put on Christ. We put on a costume, if you will, to make us look a little like Christ. We symbolically dress up as Christ. It can seem fake, it can seem hypocritical, but it can also change us. It slowly transforms us more into Christ's image. We become who we at first only pretend to be. As my friends in Alcoholics Anonymous say, we fake it till we make it. In other words, if we act as if we are compassionate or brave or kind or generous, we slowly become more compassionate, brave, kind, and generous. We have been baptized into Christ. We have been united with Christ. We have been clothed with Christ. In a way, it's like a costume, like the ones my dad and I have worn. But it can also become more and more real. Our costumes can become part of who we really are. I like to think I resemble my dad in his humor, his talent, his smarts. And happy Father's Day, Dad. I like to think also that all of us will resemble Christ more and more as we live into our baptisms, as we become more compassionate and more generous. So, let's fake it till we make it.